Alright, we back with another one, man. Goku and DC Season 4, Episode 19. In this episode, Goku's going to meet Constantine. We probably got like one or two more episodes after this one to finish this season out. It's been a long season, man. Damn, 20 episodes. Anyway, man, shout out to the members, man. Jason57835, John Lane 2016, OD Demon 34, and Quade Moat, man. I appreciate the memberships, man. It helps me get better and better with the content, get a better budget. I appreciate it. Shout out to the subscribers as well. So anyway, let's get into it. The rubble, Strome Plaza, had fallen into an almost sacred silence. Beast Boy picked his way through the scattered debris, going through fragments of armor, twisted metal, and the broken remnants of Deathstroke's weapons until he reached the wall where Flash had propped himself up. Barry Allen sat with his back against a cracked pillar, his injured legs stretched out before him, the blood already beginning to darken and clot around the wound. His face was still pale beneath the sweat and grime, but his eyes were open, alert, tracking Beast Boy's approach with something like wonder. Beast Boy lowered himself carefully to sit beside his teammate, his green skin still slick with the exertion of his impossible transformation. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of distant battle, the shrieks of Spawn, the rumble of collapsing buildings seemed to belong to another world entirely. And then Beast Boy spoke. "You okay?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse and stripped of all bravado. It was the voice of Garfield Logan, not the Beast, not the Avenger, just a young man who had done something necessary and was now only beginning to process it all. Flash let out a breath that was half laugh, half groan. "Not really," he admitted, wincing as he shifted his weight. "But I will be." He managed a weak chuckle, the sound surprisingly warm, despite everything. I have a pretty decent healing factor, remember? My speedy metabolism. I'll be up and running in about a day or two. 3 tops. He gestured vaguely at the leg. Slade knew his anatomy. I'll give him that. Hit me where it counts. But he forgot that I can also heal in a flash. Ha ha. And Beast Boy rolled his eyes, but his lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. Now that's a superhero dad joke. Heal in the flash. Then they sat together in the settling dust. 2 survivors of a war that wasn't even finished yet, taking a moment to simply breathe. The moment of exhausted peace was shattered like glass, however, from the shadows of collapsed buildings, from the gaps between rubble piles, from the very cracks in the earth. They came. Dozens of them, Piccolo's demon clan Hellspawn, emerged with horrifying synchronization, with their burning red eyes fixing on the 2 injured heroes with predatory hunger. Their forms were nightmares given flesh, some hulking and muscular, others slender and swift, with bladed forearms that gleamed in the crimson light. Their jaws worked silently, anticipating the feast. Beast Boy hopped back on his feet in an instant, his body tensed to a shift, but exhaustion was still pulling at every muscle. He poured everything into killing Deathstroke, with his Ozaru transformation and all. His reserves were empty, his transformation sluggish. He could feel the green energy flickering weakly within him, responding like a dying ember. Flash pushed himself upright against the wall, one hand clamped over his wounded leg. The blood had slowed, but the damage remained. The tendon was severed. The muscles were shredded. He couldn't run, not very fast, if at all. He could barely stand. The Speed Force just hummed beyond his reach, tantalizing and almost useless. The Spawn fanned out in a loose semicircle, cutting off escape routes. Their leader, a large specimen with extra rows of teeth and spines along its arms, took a deliberate step forward, savoring the moment. Its head tilted almost mockingly, as if it understood exactly how helpless its prey was. Beast Boy positioned himself between Flash and the approaching horde, his fist clenched, his jaw set. "All right, new plan," he muttered over his shoulder. "I'm going to cause a distraction, and when I say go, you go. And I'll hold him off as long as I can. Guard, don't argue with me for once in your life, man." His voice cracked, but with the resolve behind it was as solid as stone. "All right? You're the one who matters in this. If anyone's getting out of this, it should be you." The Spawn surged forward as one, a wave of claws and teeth and burning eyes. But the Spawn were mid-charge, and their claws reaching for the 2 defenseless heroes, and their jaws were gaping wide for the killing attacks. when the world screamed. It wasn't a simple sound that traveled through air, it was a frequency, resonating directly in the crystalline structures of the demon clan's Namekian's biology. Every spawn in the plaza froze mid-stride as if struck by paralysis. Their burning red eyes flickered wildly, their jaws clamped shut involuntarily. A unified, agonized shriek erupted from dozens of throats, a sound so high and piercing that Beast Boy and Flash had to cover their ears, even though it wasn't meant for them. Well, at least they had to cover their ears at first, and then it seemed to tune itself. The spawn convulsed, they dropped to their knees, their claws scrabbling uselessly at their own heads as if trying to tear out the source of the pain. Their larger leader toppled sideways, its legs kicking spasmodically. Within seconds, every single demon lay twitching on the ground, completely incapacitated, their advanced nervous systems hijacked by a frequency that they couldn't fight against. Beast Boy stared, his jaw hanging open. What the? A soft chime came from Flash's communicator. He fumbled for it with trembling fingers, bringing the small screen to life to see a hologram of Batman's face appear, grim and unsurprised. The Batcave's dim lighting throwing sharp shadows across his own cowl. Frequency towers are operational, Batman stated, his voice clipped and efficient. I've seeded them across every major metropolitan area. The sonic wave is tuned specifically to the unique hearing of Piccolo's Hellspawn. An anatomy I've been analyzing since the first Central City King Piccolo incident, years ago. It causes immediate neural overload without harming human biology. I even fine-tuned it to spare our Piccolo's hearing to avoid friendly fire. But I wouldn't call him a friend. He paused, his eyes flicking briefly to something off screen. You're welcome. Flash let out a laugh that was half hysterical, half relieved. Bruce, man, I could kiss you. Don't. Batman's tone was flat, but there might have been the faintest ghost of something, slight amusement or approval. In the set of his jaw, the screw went dark. Beast Boy looked at the twitching, immobilized spawn scattered across the plaza, then at Flash, then back at the spawn. A slow, incredulous grin spread across his face. Remind me to never play a poker game against that guy. Meanwhile, Goku slammed his palm against the barrier for the 5th time. And for the 5th time, the translucent crimson wall repelled him with a force that sent painful vibrations up his arm and throughout the rest of his body. It wasn't like a physical wall, it was like pushing against reality itself, against the fundamental law that said this space is claimed, this space is closed. Frustration was building in his chest like a compressed key blast. Raven was right there, suspended at the top of Titan's tower, her small form wreathed in that horrible amalgam of violet and bloody red. He could feel her, the flicker of her true self buried beneath Trigon's corruption. He was so close, helpless, because he couldn't reach her. He drew his fist back again, determination overriding reason. Why? Then another voice was heard. You can't force yourself through that barrier, Spike. The voice was unfamiliar, British, casual, and utterly out of place in the middle of an apocalypse. Goku spun, dropping into a fighting stance, his senses flaring outward. Standing 20 feet away, one hand in the pocket of a rumpled beige trench coat, the other bringing a cigarette to his lips, was a man who looked like he'd wandered in from a completely different kind of disaster. Blonde hair, tired blue eyes, a 5 o'clock shadow, and an expression that suggested he'd seen worse than this, and was thoroughly unimpressed by the whole affair. Goku blinked. Who are you? The man took a long drag on his cigarette, exhaled a cloud of smoke that seemed to mock the hellish atmosphere around him, and offered a lazy half smile. Name's Constantine. John Constantine. He gestured with the cigarette toward the barrier, toward Raven's towering prison, and toward the churning sky beyond. And that's not the kind of party you crash by knocking down the door, mate. Trust me, I've crashed a few in my time. He took another drag, his tired eyes appraising Goku with something that might have been a professional interest. You're going to need a different approach. Lucky for you, I specialize in different approaches. Elsewhere, the smoke and dust of their cataclysmic battle slowly settled, revealing a scene of profound, intimate transformation. Piccolo stood over his own father. His divine golden aura had already faded to nothing, leaving only the battered green Namekian. he had always been. Below him, King Piccolo lay broken in the glassy crater, his charcoal dark skin, the mark of Trigon's corruption, slowly fading back to its original green. Each breath came in shallow, rattling gasps that stirred the ash around his lips. The ancient demon's burning eyes, now dimming to something almost mortal, found his very son's face, and for the first time in his long, hateful existence, they held no contempt, no calculation. Something that might have been pride flickered within the depths of his vision. The ancient demon's burning eyes, now dimming, something mortal found his son's face. Why did I read that twice? Anyway, something that might have been pride flickered in the depths. You are, King Piccolo's voice was gravelly, whisper, stripped of its hellish resonance. My worthy successor after all, it seems. A painful chuckle escaped him, ending in a wet cough that sprayed dark ichor across his lips. Piccolo knelt beside him, his expression unreadable. I am not your successor, old man. I'm my own person now. I chose my path. The dying demon's chuckle returned, weaker this time, but carrying an edge of knowing bitterness. So you think. His eyes locked onto his son's with sudden desperate intensity. But let me warn you, boy. Teth Adam. He paused to gather strength, each word costing him. He is hardly any better than me. He is a tyrant pretending to be some type of anti-hero. A day will come when you will see that for yourself, when his ambition and your mindset collide. The words hung in the poisoned air. Before Piccolo could respond, his father's form began to fade, not dramatically, but gently, like morning mist burning away. The edges of his body grew translucent, the green skin paling to almost gray, then to nothing. Give me your hand, King Piccolo rasped urgently, his voice barely audible. Quickly, while there's still time. Piccolo hesitated for only a heartbeat, then extended his own arm. Their hands clasped, father and son, demon and guardian, enemy, and something else. A warmth flooded through the contact, but it was no gentle blessing. It burned. Crimson energy, the residual essence of Trigon's power that was gifted to King Piccolo's fading form, surged into the younger Namekian like liquid fire as red veins formed over his green arms. Piccolo's teeth clenched against the agony as the hellish energy seared through his veins, merging with his own key structure, settling into the deepest recesses of his own being. King Piccolo's form grew fainter still, almost transparent at this point now. His final words were a whisper on the wind. Use it well, my son. Save your pathetic planet if you can. A ghost of his old cruel smile flickered across his dissolving features. And watch your back. Then he was gone. Nothing remained but a faint shimmer in the air and the lingering burn of stolen power in Piccolo's veins. The younger Namekian rose slowly, flexing his hand, feeling the foreign energy coiled within him like a sleeping snake. He had accepted it despite every caution screaming against it, because he knew they would need every weapon, every advantage, no matter how dangerous, to face what was coming next. He looked toward the distant spire of Titan's tower, toward the churning heart of the corruption, and began to fly towards that direction. Back at the barrier, Constantine flicked his cigarette butt into the crimson haze and rolled his sleeves with the resigned air of a plumber surveying a particular troublesome leak. Right then, let's see if the old tricks still work when the world's gone tits up. He produced a small knife from his coat, silver etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the hellish light, and drew a quick, precise arc against his own palm. Blood welled up, and he began to murmur in a language that made Goku's ears feel wrong. Syllables that scraped against reality like chalk on a cosmic blackboard. The air around them grew heavy, thick with unseen presences pressing close. Constantine's eyes rolled back briefly, showing only white, and he spoke a final resonant word that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then the barrier flickered. For one hopeful moment, Goku thought it would shatter, but instead, with a sound like a reluctant fabric tearing, a single small hole opened in the crimson membrane, roughly the size of a doorknob. Through it, Goku could see the interior of the barrier, the twisted space leading up to Raven's suspended form inside Titan's tower. The hole shimmered, already beginning to close. Constantine stared at it, his face already pale, as he went through a complex series of expressions: disbelief, irritation, and finally profound exasperation. He raised both hands to the heavens in a gesture that was half supplication and half accusation. "Bullocks!" He shouted at the uncaring sky. "Absolute bloody bullocks! I just sold 3 different favors to powers I'm going to regret for the rest of my short, miserable life, and all I get is a bloody peephole." He kicked at the barrier, which hummed mockingly in response. "This thing's got layers, Spike. Magical defenses stacked like a Vegas buffet. I can poke a hole, but I can't walk through it." Goku's brow furrowed. "So we need something or someone smaller?" "We need something or someone smaller," Constantine agreed, rubbing his temples like the universe had personally offended him. "Small and quick. Something that can slip through this crack before it seals and then plant something that can get us both in. I can do it." The voice came from behind them. Goku turned to see Beast Boy landing lightly on the scorched ground, his green skin slick with sweat, his eyes holding the exhausted but determined look of someone who had already given everything and was preparing to give more. Constantine sized him up with a practiced glance. "Well, mate, I hope you have something other than green skin that can help us." Goku spoke up and told him that Beast Boy was a shapeshifter, and Constantine gave a nod of approval. "Ah, yeah, you'll do. But listen close, because this only works once." He reached out into his coat and produced a folded piece of paper, yellow with age and covered in intricate swirling symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. "This is an anchor seal. Old magic. When you get to the center of that barrier, to the girl, yeah? You put this on the ground. Then your mate, with the spiky hair, gives me a drop of his blood, and I use it to key the anchor to him and myself. The barrier recognizes his blood as belonging on the inside, and the whole thing comes down like a house of cards." Goku didn't hesitate. He bit down on his hand, not a theatrical gesture, just practical efficiency, and held out his bleeding knuckle toward Constantine. A thick drop of sand blood welled up crimson against his skin. Constantine produced a small vial, caught the drop with practiced precision, and held it up to the hellish light. "Right then. Let's hope your biology's bloods also plays nice with the fifth-dimensional sympathetic magic. Wouldn't be the weirdest thing I've worked with." He handed the folded paper to Beast Boy. "Don't lose this. Don't get it wet. Don't let anything get it. And for God's sake, don't read the symbols out loud. Trust me on the last one." Beast Boy took the paper with reverence, tucking it carefully into a secure fold of his costume. He looked at Goku, then at the small, rapidly shrinking hole in the barrier. "I'll get it done." Then the transformation was instantaneous. A shimmer of green light and Garfield Logan was gone. In his place, a small green bat fluttered in the crimson-stained air, its wings beating in frantic, urgent strokes. The paper was clamped delicately in its tiny jaws, rolled into a secure tube that wouldn't unfold mid-flight. Constantine stepped back, gesturing toward the barrier. "Go on then, little mate. Don't keep the devil waiting." The bat didn't hesitate. It shot toward the shrinking opening like an arrow, folding its wings at the last possible second to slip through the narrow gap. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the hole would close too soon, the edges of the barrier post contracting, but the bat was already through, emerging on the other side into the twisted, corrupted space that was within. Goku watched, his breath held, as the tiny form began its ascent upward. The interior of the barrier was a nightmare of swirling crimson energy and distorted perspectives, but the bat flew with a single-minded purpose, climbing toward the top of Titan's tower, where Raven's suspended form hung like a broken doll against the bleeding sky. Each wing beat carried it higher, past floating debris and writhing tendrils of shadow that reached for it blindly. Constantine exhaled smoke, watching through the rapidly closing hole. "That's one brave kid," he murmured almost to himself. "Stupid, maybe, but brave." He glanced at Goku. "Your friend, I assume?" Goku's eyes never left the ascending bat. "Yeah, one of my best." Then the air itself curdled. Goku felt it before he saw it, a pressure change so profound it made his ears pop. His key senses screaming, a warning that came far too late. The crimson sky above Titan's tower didn't just darken, it coalesced, drawing inward like a wound closing, and from the gathering void a figure began to descend. Trigon materialized, not with a dramatic explosion, but with the terrible simplicity of a truth that was finally spoken. One moment there was only the churning hell cloud, the next he was simply there, his vast form hovering before the tower, four burning eyes fixed on the tiny figures below, with the detached interest of a god examining insects, the temperature on the ground spiked by 20 degrees, the barrier around the tower post in recognition of its master's presence. The final quarter begins, Trigon intoned, his voice vibrating through the bone and soul alike. Your struggles have been entertaining, a brief distraction from the eternal silence that is to come. But all games must end. Your world's hope dims, your allies are weak, and my daughter's resistance is fading. Goku's fist clenched, his aura flaring instinctively. He took a step forward, toward the barrier, toward the monster, towards the deity, basically. But the crimson wall still held, unpenetrable as ever. Constantine took a long, deliberate drag of his cigarette, his tired eyes fixed on the descending god. When he exhaled, the smoke seemed to struggle against the hellish atmosphere. Well, he said, his voice remarkably steady for a man staring into the face of cosmic evil. That's not ideal. He glanced at Goku, then at the tiny bat still climbing toward the tower's peak. Your little green friend might be too late to get us in, Spike. This party's about to get spectacularly boned. Then the crimson sky above them split open, but not from Trigon's descent. A streak of blue and red, moving faster than sound and fury, tore through the hellish clouds and slammed to a halt between Goku and the towering demon. Superman landed with a concussive thud that cracked the scorched earth, his cape billowing in the superheated wind and his eyes blazing with solar fire. Then let's give him something to watch, Superman said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute resolve. He didn't look at Goku or Constantine. His gaze was fixed on the colossal form that was before them, on the four burning eyes that now focused on the new defiant speck. Get inside. Save Raven. I'll keep him busy. Constantine raised an eyebrow. Busy? May. That's not a bloke you can keep busy. That's a force of... Superman was already moving. Twin beams of concentrated heat vision, bright as newborn stars, lanced from his eyes and struck Trigon square in the chest. The impact was spectacular. A detonation of red light against crimson flesh, a shockwave that rattled the barrier and sent debris flying for miles. For one glorious second, it seemed like the Kryptonians' attack might actually mean something. Trigon only looked down at the fading afterimage on his chest. Then his four eyes shifted, focusing on the tiny figure who had dared to sting him. A sound emerged, not pain, not anger, but amusement. Deep and rumbling and utterly terrifying. A spark, Trigon observed, his voice dripping with condescending interest. A brighter spark than the others. How refreshing. He raised one massive hand, shadows coalescing around it. Let us see how long you burn. Superman hovered firm, not retreating an inch, his jaw set in grand determination. Behind him, Goku watched, his heart pounding not with fear but with the desperate need to make a move, to act, to help. The distraction had worked. The demon's attention was elsewhere for now. Now they just had to use it to their advantage. And that'll be the end of this episode, man. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys also think of this, how this Constantine design turned out. I like it. But also, I think he looks a little too young. You know, I probably should give him like some stubble or some type of, little small scraggly beard or something. I don't know. Let me know what y'all think in the comments, though, of course. And of course, leave a like, all that. Shout out to the members. I'll see y'all on the next one. Gone. Peace.